up in Wellingtons.
Oh, I
So
see.
we were there and you crewed up in Wellingtons.
Right.
Because you gradually made this for the benefit of the pilots,
Yeah.
so they didn't go straight onto 4 engines or anything. It's quite a long process. I mean, from the time I joined up in March, when I actually went, to the time when I did the first operation, was 2¼ years. The wing consisted of 3 aerodromes, and our overall commander was Wing Commander Guy Gibson, who led the Dambusters raid. We had to go out into the Baltic and lay mines. So you weren't bombing, you were laying mines. And we did that, turned around to come back, and one of the engines cut out. We were about 200 miles. And we managed just to maintain height, only just, you were losing height imperceptibly. And then a second engine cut out. So we now had 2 engines that were cut out, and 2 engines that were functioning and losing height. And so there was a readiness within the aircraft as to where we were, and we were about 100 miles out, and then a third engine went. So we were flying on one engine. Well, to fly a 4-engine bomber on one engine, I mean, you're just going to go down. And we all got in position ready to ditch, and he was going to pancake the aircraft on, and we'd have to get out and hope to God the lifeboat functioned and get into the lifeboat. And as we were coming down, we must have been about 1,500 feet. The second engine picked up. And so he was able to maintain height a little better. And then the third engine picked up, but the fourth engine never did. So he was able to stay at about 1,000 feet. And we came in and landed at an emergency airfield just north of Hull, straight in off the North Sea. The big thing about aircrew was that you went out, did your operation, you came back. If you were in the army, then you would land and you advance, or not advance, or dig in and so on. You didn't have this haven that you came back to. You were out on active service, roughing it all the time. We didn't rough it. You were in peril or danger for the time that you flew the operation, or certainly the time you're over enemy territory. But you came back. Mind you, it wasn't always easy as that, because what happened at one stage was that the German fighters would come over and they would be circling the aerodrome waiting for the aircraft to land. If you got hit by anti-aircraft, as we did, on the 11th mission, then you were unlucky.
Mm.
And we got hit by anti-aircraft fire, and so we were limping, as it were. And we got picked up by a German night fighter, because we were a lame duck, and he finished us off, and the aircraft caught fire. We knew we were prepared to bail out, but we thought we might get back to England. But when the aircraft caught fire, there was no chance. When we actually got on fire, we had an engineer with us who wasn't our regular engineer. Our regular engineer was sick, and this fellow had come in as a spare, taken from another crew, but as a spare. They hadn't flown with us at all, and when we had to bail out, in the Lancaster, there was a trap right near the front of the aircraft, which the people in the front of the aircraft, like the pilot, myself, the bomb aimer and the wireless operator, and the engineer had to use. And this engineer was sitting there like this, because you had to do a forward roll out of the hole, and he was there, and he was absolutely petrified. he couldn't go.
Was it his first mission?
Yeah, he couldn't go, you see, he just didn't. So I just put my foot in his back and pushed him, and away he went. And I can't claim any credit for bravery, but I didn't feel frightened at all. I don't know why, but I didn't. And when it came my turn to bail out, normally they said count anything between 3 and 10. Well, we were at 20,000 feet, so I knew that we were a damn way up, so I counted 20, and then opened the ripcord, or the parachute. And it took me about, see this again, I looked at my watch before I went, looked at my watch when we were coming down near landing, it's 20 minutes, descending.
In pitch darkness, so you had no idea?
No, it wasn't in pitch darkness. It was quite moonlight. Because the fear I had of coming down was that I'd land in water, that you'd either land in a big river or a lake or something, because that would be difficult with a parachute. But in fact, I landed in a cornfield. I walked about 20 miles, I guess, towards the front. It took me a couple of days. And I wanted to sleep at night, and I found a barn near a farmhouse, but there was a barn, and there was all hay in this barn. So I climbed over the barbed wire and went into the barn and settled down and slept. And the next thing I knew, there were childish voices, and I woke, and there was a boy and 2 girls who were standing way back just looking at me. And I went to stand on my feet, and they gave a short scream and they ran. And I thought, it's going to be tricky. So I gathered what stuff I had, which wasn't very much obviously. I was going to go out and over the barbed wire to get out, when coming up the path was this huge Frenchman who was carrying a shotgun. And he just levelled the shotgun at me, so I just put my hands up and went back down. And he came in, he couldn't speak English, so it was the old phrase card and the pidgin pronunciation. And he beckoned me to go with him, and he took me into his house, the back of the house, round the back of the house, and there was a sort of adjunct to a barn, which was like steps up and like an attic, and he said, "You go in now." And then one day he came up and he said, beckoned me and must say, "Gather your stuff, we're going." Well, we'd heard that once you got into the underground that they would pass you on, and he was mayor of the village, I found out later, and he said, "Right, we're going, you go." So we went, and they passed us on to one, and they passed us on to another, and this was a car, the last one we were in, and I thought, right, we're going to make some good distance. We'll get somewhere. And we'd gone along this road about 3 miles, and suddenly this car just turned off the road into a clearing. And out of the clearing, from behind the hedges, there came about 4 Germans. And this fellow got out of the car and indicated, there I was the only one. It was a French jail, and the cell I was in, there was a Frenchman, 2 Frenchmen. One was fairly phlegmatic, and the other one was absolutely near gibbering with fear. And his wife used to come and visit him every other day, and she would give him cubes of sugar. I'm not quite sure how she got the cubes of sugar, but she gave him cubes of sugar which she put brandy on and gave them to him, and he would suck the sugar and have the brandy, you see, in that way. That quietened him for a bit, but he was very afraid, and in the end he had good reason to be, because they took him out and shot him after about a week. And so you wondered where the hell you were going to be, because they just wanted to know who you were, and you just gave your name, rank and number as per the orders that you had. And I had my dog tagged, you see, and said, this proves that I'm an English soldier. No, I said, no, it doesn't prove anything. You can afford serves, they don't mean anything. He said, look, I'll show you they don't mean anything. And he cut them off my neck and threw them away. And eventually, we didn't realise it at the time, but we finished up at Buchenwald, which was a concentration camp in northern Germany. And there we were, I suppose you'd say, imprisoned. It wasn't like being in a cell, but you were no hope of escaping. And I went into Buchenwald on my 20th birthday.
Gosh.
And we slept outside, and we had a roll call every day, twice a day, when we had to line up, and that was all of us mixed in together. And this appel, as they called it, used to last between 2 and 3 hours. They got it until they got the numbers right, which meant they had to have 2 lots of counting agreeing, and that was the number. Nobody could escape. And
Appel, that's a French word, isn't it?
no, it's a German word meaning name. Appel, I think. Appel. It was called the appel. It's like a roll call, something to do with name, like in the English word appellation, where you get a name. We were in long huts, like rabbit hutches, really, long huts, a bit like a Nissen hut, except we've got a square top, and there were just bunks up, and we'd be about 300 in one of these things. I mean, it was very cramped conditions, and you slept in an area about that. There was a bunk about that high, so it was a question of crawling in, crawling out, and sleeping. And we got fed once a day, and they would take us out to work sometimes, because we were physically better than a lot of people, and you worked lifting. It was working in a sawmill, working and lifting and stacking and that sort of thing. And eventually we moved from being outside to moving inside, and we were able to hold a meeting informally. It was very difficult actually, but they got the word round, and we had a New Zealander who was a squadron leader, and he being the senior British officer, or senior officer, was the one who was in charge, so there was a sort of elementary discipline that was going on. And he tried to negotiate with the commandant, or tried to get an audience with him, to get us into prisoner of war camps. In October, we'd been 2 months in Buchenwald. They took us out, got us on a train, and they took us to a prisoner of war camp. We didn't know where we were going, they didn't tell you. And we then went and arrived at Stalag III, which is right in the Silesia, part of Poland now, but it was sort of East Germany then. And Stalag III was where the wooden horse took place, and where the Great Escape took place. But there was no escaping when we got there, because after the Great Escape, when 140 got out, those that they were captured and brought back were shot, which was against
I
the
remember.
Geneva Convention.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, Geoff, before you go on that, was Buchenwald an extermination camp?
Oh, yeah.
So you were there when they were actually...
Oh yeah, there was
Yes.
all these concentration camps, and I mean it's quite a notorious one. It's not as notorious as Belsen or Auschwitz, but it was up there. All these camps had their own gas chambers, and people were taken away. They weren't sure where they were going, and they were taken into these gas chambers, and they were gassed. Yeah, the thing was, you knew that the Allies had landed, and you knew that they were making reasonable progress. I mean, they'd reached Paris. They hadn't got onto German soil at all, but they'd reached Paris. But you just didn't know how long you were going to be there, and you didn't know whether you'd be alive next week. There was no, as I say, no escaping allowed by the order of the senior British officer in the camp. So there was no question of escaping. So we got there in the October, just as winter was beginning to come in. And in fact, in the November, what happened, there was a large part of the compound that we were allowed to dig to about that depth, and they flooded it every night, and eventually you got a skating rink. And there were so many skates that had been donated by the Red Cross, and you signed up and you managed to get to skate about once every 10 days. And then in January, because the Russians were advancing, we had to get out of there, and we had to walk. We made homemade sledges to put what goods you had, clothes particularly you needed because it was winter. And we marched and put up in schools or churches, village halls. We just stayed overnight there, and they got us to a railway station which would be about 60 miles away. Got on a train, and again it was cattle trucks, and we didn't know where we were going, but eventually we finished up at Bremen. My mother heard that I was a prisoner of war just before Christmas of '44. So she knew I was alive, but there was no way of getting in contact. Of course, they weren't on the telephone. Getting access to a telephone was quite difficult, particularly in a camp, RAF camp, not like now. And of course we were never on the telephone. So it was a question of, we were allowed home after about 5 days. So I think I dropped a line, I can't remember, she would know, but I can't remember. And eventually I did get home.